Welcome to Healthcare IT Today. I'm John Lynn, together with my colleague and friend Colin Hung. The world of technology and healthcare are ever changing in new and novel ways, and that's why we love this stuff. So join us as we discuss the latest healthcare and health IT news, meshed together in new ways which help generate ideas and new perspectives. Plus, we'll have a little fun along the way. Today, we'll be talking about the Facebook Pixel breach and its impact on healthcare. And be sure to follow the show on social media at the hashtag HITSM and our personal accounts at TechGuy and at Colin_Hung. Plus, check out our 17 years of health IT blog content at healthcareittoday.com. Are you a big Facebook user, Colin? Where are you at on the Facebook addiction?
No, I do not. That is one of the few social media platforms that I do not participate very much in, and that's Facebook.
Really? Yeah, I'm still pretty, Gen X, I'm still connected. I like to see my high school friends, my college friends. I've moved around a bit, so I like to see old friends and what they're up to. I'm more of a I'm the casual, snarky commenter, which should be no surprise to anyone that knows me, versus sharing my whole life. I'll share occasionally with something funny from my kids or whatnot, which I actually enjoy because I get, when I get those reminders, they make me happy. So I should probably do it more. But, I'm mostly following other people and commenting and, replying to them.
I totally get that. I'm nothing against Facebook. I never got the bug. I never it's got sucked into that. I know if I sat down and used it for a little while, I probably would, but it just wasn't for me.
Well, as a middle-aged single guy, it's pretty good too. It's still kind of the platform to connect with, especially within my communities. It's pretty powerful that way as well.
I guess we should start this episode. I have to say, just for the record and for disclosure, neither John nor I are lawyers, and this is not legal advice, anything we're going to talk about today.
Consult a lawyer.
Right, please consult your own general counsel on this. But obviously, this is a big topic, certainly in two realms of healthcare, those in the sort of data privacy and suite, right, the CISOs and everyone, and of course on the marketing side as well, because it has a big impact on that department. But yeah, for those that may be not familiar, basically what's come to light is anyone using the Facebook Pixel, or any pixel for that matter, to do any sort of retargeting or tracking of your patients or your visitors to your website, and then they go somewhere else. You typically would use a Facebook Pixel to kind of do lookalike marketing or to do retargeting of ads. Well, it turns out that OCR has come down and said, actually, that is a HIPAA violation. And it's not hard to understand why they would consider it that way. The quick example being, John, if someone goes to a hospital's website and is just looking up, a condition, right? And they land on the conditions page, and then you put the pixel on there, and then they go somewhere else on the internet or on Facebook, and you want to offer them, hey, like, come and join the free class, right, to learn more about that condition. Perfectly innocuous, like in the general sense, but because you've sort of told a third party that this person was on your page looking at this condition and they served up a retargeting ad to them on another website, that's where the breach happens. So my question to you, John, based on what I've just described, and again, I've oversimplified it.
Sure.
Do you think this Facebook breach, this Pixel breach thing, is much to do about nothing?
So, I mean, it is much ado. And if I'm in a hospital or health system, that Facebook Pixel better come down immediately, right? So in that regard, it's a big deal, right? And I think every healthcare organization has or will, remove it, as quickly as possible, because, OCR's made it clear that, this is a problem. The trouble I have is that every single hospital was doing it. Pretty much, like the ones that weren't was because they weren't sophisticated enough to use retargeting and things like that, right? So it wasn't because they didn't want to, it's just they hadn't got to it yet, right? Probably. So it's interesting that every healthcare organization pretty much, and I'd love to hear if there were a few organizations who thought this was risky and didn't do it, but the majority, when you look at the numbers, decided to use it and thought this wasn't a breach. So it's interesting to see hey, they thought this was reasonable way to share, and are we really sharing PHI? And by the way, this happens every day on Google when I search for depression, and now Google knows that I'm, interested in depression or whatever, if I search for a specific drug, et cetera. Right. So, is this a huge problem? Doing it right? Has it caused any sort of concern? Has there been a breach because of it that has made a patient have an issue? I think it's, are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater here? And maybe I'll go back one step and say, is there some sensible restrictions that we could put on this that allow for a hospital to do this effectively and to provide great services and access to great resources without violating their trust? I think so. And I think right now, at least the way they've ruled, it feels like a bit of an overstretch.
Yeah, I have to be a little different on this one. I do think it is a breach, and what you could argue whether it was right for them to start imposing it as a breach or considering a breach now as opposed to when it first came out, right? Like, it's not like this pixel hasn't been around for a while.
Sure. Could they have given some guidance since everyone was doing it? Yeah.
and honestly, they did. I mean, there was some warning that this was coming, right? So, but it was fairly fast. Like, it was because of the nature of it. You don't want to let this sort of sit out there for a year, right? Like, you want it, if you knew about it, you got to act on it.
Well, a warning doesn't get as much news as a penalty or
exactly. So, I think this is a big deal, and it's nothing to do with the hospital side in my mind. I think, and what I mean by that, I think most people who are using this were using it in a way that makes sense for the context, right? They were just simply trying to offer a service to a patient who showed interest in something, right? And to use the technology the way it's intended for every other industry to make sure that they were reminded of those types of services that could be helpful for better health, right? So I think the heart was in the right place of why you would use it, right? I don't think they were looking at it going, oh, well, like, we wanted to use it for a nefarious reason. The problem was, of course, that all these systems are so automated, that little tidbit of information then gets shared with Facebook and its set of partners, and now all of a sudden that patient is getting a bunch of other stuff that's advertised to them because now there's knowledge that they were interested in this one condition, right? And and in some cases, they actually may have it. So I do think any patient breach and patient privacy has to be taken seriously. So I do think that, rightfully so, a lot of CISOs and others and marketing leaders have just quickly gone scorched earth, right? And just decided we just got to shut all this stuff down until the dust settles and we figure out what the real rules are and whether or not there's going to be some exceptions made. And of course, now there are some solutions to this, right? Like Eruptor has a solution that they've created to get around this problem, or at least give you back some sort of retargeting without some of this stuff happening. But in general, I would say it's definitely a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, it is a problem. Obviously we want to protect patients' information. That's important. I think it'll be interesting to see how that feeling evolves, though. And it really is a legislative question as well, right? Why are certain things acceptable as certain things aren't? And, the best example of that is, follow the HIPAA, parody account, right? That points out all the times HIPAA is called when it actually doesn't apply. And one of the most common is that you're not a covered entity, right? And so, anyone could do this fine. And you could, I could create an app right now that's a depression app and ask you all these intimate questions about you and your depression. And then I could retarget you based on that information. And that would not be a breach of HIPAA because I am not a covered entity. Right. And so we're going to allow anyone to do this, but hey, let's restrict healthcare organizations and kind of tie their hands. Like, something feels wrong about that inconsistency, right? Does it need to apply to everyone, right? I mean, maybe you could go that way, right? And be like, yeah, everyone should have to be more careful with health information because it is so valuable, right? But it is interesting how we pick and choose what we have to do. It kind of reminds me of Shahid Shah one time talking about why aren't EHRs regulated as medical devices? And he's like, yeah, you can make a case that they are a medical device and should be regulated the same way. But for whatever reason, we decided they weren't. And so
Right.
we haven't, right? Like, and so, I kind of feel like this is the same, right? Like that we're like, is this really important or is it not? And they decided it was. And so now, okay, we can't do it. But I'd love to hear more. I know you were recently at a marketing conference and heard, kind of the impact of these, penalties and kind of, hand slaps, if you will, for in some cases. What's that impact that's, it's causing on the industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was just at NESHCO, which is a New England, a healthcare marketing conference that's put on every year. A great group. First time I've been, but it was fantastic, and it was actually pretty amazing the widespread impact that this has had on healthcare marketers. So first of all, I mentioned it before. Some organizations have just gone scorched earth. They ripped out that pixel as soon as it became clear that this was a breach. They stopped using it everywhere, which means a complete instantaneous shutdown of all retargeting, all use of that kind of lookalike marketing that they were doing in Facebook and in Google and in other platforms. So instantly they went from like 50,000 a month spend to zero, right? Like on that kind of stuff, right? So now, at the same time, it was painful because they were getting a lot. It was actually a very effective way to bring people in the door and get them to sign up or book an appointment and those things. And all of a sudden that now wasn't an option.
I was going to say, what does the CFO think about this? Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that was the thing. So in a bad way, a bad situation, it kind of highlighted how valuable this really was because you could see the drop in patient appointments and signups and reaction. And so, that was the big immediate impact. The second impact, which was kind of logical when you think about it, but interesting nonetheless, was Dan Dunlop and Jeff Stiebla both mentioned that all of a sudden everyone in the marketing department had to become a HIPAA expert.
That's interesting.
Right. Whereas before, like you could have like one person on the team that was sort of like fluent in HIPAA and would realize, hey guys, we can't publish that picture because it's got PHI in the background, or you had like one person that was sort of the PHI and HIPAA watchdog. But now with what happened with the Facebook pixel, suddenly the entire department had to get like HIPAA trained and they all became like they had to read up on all the issues here. They all became HIPAA experts almost overnight.
Yeah, which is not a bad outcome. I mean, I probably should have had that done before. I was watching a TV show last night where they actually went into the hospital, and of course, I was watching. Oh, are there any patients shown? Or I was like, how'd they get that hallway for that shot? That's interesting, like because it is a challenge, right? And luckily, they did a really good job with that. But it's interesting. I think the other challenge is that Facebook's kind of taken the egg on the face, but this applies to Google. This applies to any tracking, right? That
Right.
is going in there, and you look at a lot of these platforms and you say, oh, are they business associates? Will they do that? And I think it will be interesting to watch and see it evolve because as you mentioned, this is a financial impact on healthcare organizations. Is it that big of a financial impact on Facebook and Google? And my answer is probably a little bit, right? And if you're over the healthcare division of Facebook ads and or Google AdSense, right, AdWords, accounts, then yeah, it's a big deal for you. But will you have a big enough voice to be able to make the changes that are needed and navigate the regulatory requirements and push the regulatory requirements that are needed for this to be a reality going forward? I think that's going to be interesting to watch because Facebook has been the poster boy to be, smacked down, but this includes any tracking. Then you start wondering, you're like, well, what about the Google Analytics code that's on every website? Is that passing information to Google? Do we have a BAA? It starts making you question any of your marketing tracking tools, right? Okay, what if I create a tiny URL or shortened URL, and is my URL shortening service, is that considered a BAA? And now I'm breaching information there. And so it definitely opens up a big can of worms.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think, the outcome, as you mentioned, is a good thing. I think because of what's happened with the Facebook pixel, it's made marketers and frankly CISOs a lot more aware of these casual uses of data that you might not have realized was happening in your organization. Like, let's be honest, like other than occasionally getting involved with marketing, it was not like the major part of a breach. You never really thought about marketing as being the breach point of a hospital for PHI, right? Like there's a lot of other vulnerabilities that happen in an organization. But I think this has raised the level to go, hey, actually, there's all these other use cases that we have that are tertiary to care that we may need to relook at and reevaluate in terms of privacy and security of patient data. So I think that in general is a good outcome. Unfortunately, it's just having a negative impact just at a time when we're trying to get patients back through the door already, and that's already been challenging. Now you remove a great tool that was helping there. That's a sort of a double blow to a lot of hospitals. Hey, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Healthcare IT Today with John Lynn and Colin Hung. Today, we're talking about the Facebook Pixel and its impact on the industry. So John, I got to ask you this question, and if you can answer this, a lot of people will hire you as a consultant. How can healthcare organizations navigate around some of these privacy requirements that have come out?
I mean, we kind of already described what the de facto reaction was, and it was highlighted in a recent CIO podcast I did with the CISO. And I was talking to him, and I knew the marketing chief marketing officer at his health system. So I said, "Oh, do you know so and so?" He said, "Oh yeah." I always talk to her. I say, "You're not using that Facebook Pixel, are you?" Which is like, and he kind of said it offhand, and I'm sure he's had more discussions, but I think that has been the approach right now, is just remove it and let's see where this all goes later. I think maybe the best answer is looking at other opportunities such as content, right? Content marketing is still there, and that way they self-select into the opportunity. The question is, how do you get to the Facebook algorithm that was driving that traffic, or how do you get to the Google algorithm? And content may be the answer to that, right? So does that mean you need to create some Facebook groups? Does that mean you need to create content that you share to your group, or that your other employees share, et cetera, right? And then, obviously from a search engine optimization perspective, if you create the right content, you can get it, listed where you are paying for it. So, if you do it right, the long term may be good, right? Because SEO is you can build it and reap rewards for a long time to come if you do it properly. And sure, it needs some maintenance, but you don't have to keep paying for it the way that paid search and Facebook's advertising was. So I don't know. I guess that would be my first suggestion, right? Is look at the content, and what's interesting is I wonder how many organizations had really taken the time to do that. Hey, these were converting. Why didn't I do this a long time ago? Creating these pages that obviously patients are searching for this information. Can I give them what they want and satisfy them and create a long-term asset rather than just a short-term pay for play?
Yeah, it's a good answer, John. And I agree with you in the sense of, I don't know, other than adding your voice to the AHA's protest of what's going on, or adding it to the voice of your local association to kind of voice to OCR
your senator.
or your senator or to Facebook to go, hey, we need some change here. I mean, you can definitely do that.
Right.
But short of that, I don't really know what else that you can do to directly impact the privacy, because this is at the sort of legislative level. But I think one way you can address this is actually coming at it sort of 90 degrees. And what I mean by that is, well, the reason why you needed retargeting is because you didn't convert them, right? Mm-hmm. Like there was some reason why they didn't convert. They were on a page, you had them interested, but then they didn't do the call to action that you really wanted them to do. Well, maybe you need to revisit that page and go, well, was the book appointment button on that page? In the first, and or are there too many call to actions maybe, and they were confused. That's why they left. That's why I had to do retargeting. So I think this is an opportunity to kind of look at and go, why did I need retargeting in the first place? Could I have converted them right then and there to something like sign up for this newsletter or something like that, where I go, now I have direct permission to send some information to this person. And now I can have a one-to-one conversation, right, with my custom content, as you put there. And that's far better than a retargeted ad, right? That's a far better spend. So I would say that, how an healthcare organization can navigate through this time, well, take a look at those pages that you were previously having to use the pixel on, and kind of figuring out what can you do to get them to actually click and take an action that allows you to engage with them a lot more.
It is fascinating to think that you can retarget if you have their email their cell phone number. Right now, the problem is that sometimes it's hard to get someone to give you their email or their cell phone number, right? Whereas the Facebook pixel just happened automatically and you could retarget without them giving the express permission per se. So, that is interesting though, but it's fun to think about like, hey, you can retarget to email or text that exact same message that converted in the future if you know it. So, I imagine there's going to be some interesting discussions there that say, like you said, how do I capture them on the page so that I can retarget them in the future? There's probably some interesting opportunities there for an organization.
Yeah, since we're on the topic, John, like, if you think about this pixel problem, it was sort of everyone was doing it, everyone was using it, no one thought of it as a big deal, no one really considered it as a breach, and all of a sudden it is, right? But there's some equally casual uses of other tools that are kind of fall in the same category here, and that one of them, obviously, for me, is ChatGPT, right? Like the use of generative AI tools like ChatGPT, there may be people throwing some pretty sensitive data into that, and that is also not private, right? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting to see like the EHR vendors' reaction to this, where they're like, yeah, we're not using ChatGPT. It's not HIPAA compliant. Of course, we can't send that data there, right? As an obvious thing. But of course, if I'm a line nurse that's helping patients and having to write referral letters to all of these doctors to refer them to specialists, and I'm like, wow, ChatGPT could do this for me. How about I do it, right? And by the way, the name is Colin Hung and he has XYZ condition and I want to do this. And then the nurse is like, wait, I shouldn't be doing that, because they don't understand. It wasn't a intentional breach of trying to share the info, but it was definitely a breach if you put that PHI into ChatGPT. So I think that's where we're going to see it. And, it's going to be interesting to see how much of that happens, that it becomes so commonplace that how do we even enforce it, right? Like, and I think it'll be interesting to see how the health IT vendors approach this as well, right? Will they build their own models? I know ECW is leveraging the Microsoft Azure platform. They got some early access to be able to use their large language models so that it stays private, right? And there's a BAA with Azure to be able to do this kind of thing. But yeah, there's going to be lots of casual use cases.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head there. I can totally see innocently how a doc or somebody at a clinic needs to write a summary of something, right? And just says, oh, you know what? Here, I'll just copy and paste this very long note and say, can you just summarize this, right?
Maybe even just for fun, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's see what ChatGPT does.
Right. But like sometimes you have to write those summaries and like you said, to forward it on to a referring physician. But the copy and paste, you just don't realize that, oh, look, the name of the person was in there and I didn't see it, right? And then you just plunk it in there and then boom, you've caused a violation for a good reason. Like you were just trying to make a summary and do it quicker because you've got other patients you need to take care of. And I think, again, like because of the pixel, I think we're now becoming more aware of this type of thing. And hopefully, this is now becoming part of the training and part of the awareness where people are going, hey, we can't use these public generative AI tools. You can use this private one, like the ECW case, where you can use that one because it's embedded, it's closed, it doesn't go to the public, it's not that information is going to stay in-house. But I think you have to educate a lot of people around that because it's just so new.
Well, and it's interesting to think about like all the data that Facebook collected from those millions and millions of pixel loads. Like there's no way they pull that out of their data set, right? Like even after the breach, I'm sure they'll make some casual effort to satisfy the OCR or something, right? But like the data's in their algorithms and you can't take it out, right? Like that you could take the data out, but you can't take out the algorithm. And the same is true with ChatGPT. Like if you put that info into ChatGPT, it's out there and it has it available. And there's no like, hey, I want to remove any information that's false about Colin Hung, right? Like, or John Lid, right? Like, and so I think that's one of the challenges is like, once it's out there, it's out there. And then the question is, oh, what's the legal precedent? If that's public information, is it a breach? I don't know. It gets complicated really quick.
Yeah, no. And I think that's, just in general, we've obviously had a lot of discussions around AI recently, but that's where I think some of the caution from the experts saying, hey, we just need to slow down here. Not because they particularly believe that, it's going to wipe out the human race, but it's more of these types of problems, right? Like, because this casual use of the AI for a very innocent reason all of a sudden makes this information now public, and now it sets a precedent. And for that poor person, suddenly this condition that they have is that considered public domain? Right. And that's an implication that as a society, we have to figure out and deal with. Right. And what the experts are saying is, of course, we need to take a step back and think that through, right, to put the protections in place, or at least make people aware, hey, the guys, like, don't use ChatGPT for this reason, because this could happen. That level of education isn't there yet. But
we're just getting started, right? I mean, I think we want to eat as much data as we can get, right? I mean, all these models want that to produce these interesting results. And so, to me, this is just the start. Yeah,
and where this leads to, I think, is it's going to make it very interesting for people who make de-identified data sets, right? Anybody who makes those kinds of tools, because a lot of thought has gone now into, well, if I could share some data with a Pixel or with a ChatGPT in a de-identified way, can I then use it, right? Is that then okay? And so I think there's going to be, one of the follow-on impacts of this will be a lot more interest in those types of tools to de-identify data, which we all know, of course, someone could put back together again, but technically it's not a breach, right? Because the entity itself did not share enough data to identify an individual patient.
I mean, I just feel like we're in a losing battle. That's the scary part.
Yeah, unfortunately it is. But on the plus side, the good news is, coming back from NESHCO and talking to the marketers, they are taking action. Like, no one's just sitting there kind of waiting to see how it ends up. No. Everyone took action. They realized that, this, whether right or wrong, is considered a breach. So they reacted quickly. And so I think that's the positive that comes out from this, which is, hey, you know what? It's a violation. Fine. We pull it. We then deal with it. And now you're starting to see some of the creative ways that people are trying to get their email address, right? Trying to get someone's cell phone. And, it's generating actually a lot of creativity, which I think is actually kind of a nice outcome from a bad situation.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, listen, thanks to all of you tuned into this episode of Healthcare IT Today. You can find out more details about our show by checking out the programs page on healthcarenowradio.com. And please share your voice and engage with the community at healthcareittoday.com and on social media using the hashtag HITSM. I'm Colin Hung, along with my friend and health IT collaborator, John Lynn. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.